Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another session of Meet the Candidate. I'm Bob DeToma, and this afternoon's guest is Matt Often. He's the chair of the Finance Committee, and he is running for a seat on the Select Board. Hi, Matt. Welcome.
Bob, thanks so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm glad to have you on board. So why don't we start off with some simple stuff? Why don't you introduce yourself and tell the viewers a little bit about your life and your hopes and dreams and aspirations to be.
Sure. Hi, Grafton. My name's Matt Often. I grew up in Massachusetts, primarily in North Reading and Chelmsford. I graduated from Chelmsford High School in 1987. Shortly before graduating from high school, I signed up on my 17th birthday to the Army Reserves. So I spent 3 years in the reserves and then realized that if I transferred over to the National Guard, I could use the GI Bill to pay for college. So I did that, spent a few years doing that. I went to college at UMass Lowell as a music major. I have a real passion for music. It's been one of the strong threads throughout my life. Pretty much while I was going through college, I worked at a technology company in the warehouse. And that was the heady days of the beginning of the internet. And I had some phenomenal opportunities to really progress in my career. And I was able to leverage through a lot of kind of hard work and persistence, my role in the warehouse into technology. And I became a network manager, and eventually I went into consulting, actually. So that sort of was really the start of my career in technology, and I've been there ever since for several decades. So I met my wife, Laura, in the late 1990s. I think it was 98 or 99. And we dated for a few years, and then we got married in 2002, which was incidentally the same year that we decided to move to Grafton. So we looked all around the area. We were really looking for that forever home. We wanted to find a place where we could raise kids, have a family, and eventually retire. And so that's kind of how we found Grafton. So kind of funny. The first thing that Laura looked at in each town that we kind of looked in is she was looking into the performance of the school system. And the first thing that I looked at was the tax rates and how much it was going to cost me to actually live in those towns. So that tells you a little bit about our the way that both of our brains work. So yeah, we came to Grafton in 2002, and at that point, both of us were really focused, kind of heads down on our careers. We started having kids in 2006, and that's when we, really started to have opportunities to get involved in the town and start building some of those relationships. And as the kids got a little bit older, we got involved in volunteering in town. So I think I was first in getting on the planning board, which was a great move. Had a lot of good experience there. I spent about a year on the planning board. After that year, Laura decided that she wanted to get on school committee. Unfortunately, the planning board and school committee meetings were the same night. We had young kids, and I just wasn't willing to pay a babysitter to go to planning board meetings. So we decided that I'd get off planning board and she'd get on to school committee. So she's been on it ever since. Couple of years after that, I saw some opportunities to get onto finance committee and hopped onto finance committee. I've been there ever since for quite a few years.
You weren't kidding, because
it's true. It's absolutely true.
No, I mean, we might as well wrap it up, because you've given your whole life. You're good to go. There's everything right there in a nutshell. So
there you go. Sorry, was that too long? I don't know. Anyways,
don't worry about it. You're running for office. You get to talk.
So that's me.
Yeah. So have you all? Well, first of all, I was going to comment with you're a little bit of a Renaissance man. You're Army Reserves, musician, technology, kind of wrap it all up there.
Bob, life's rich. You got to take advantage of it. I just picked up the violin 4 years ago, and it was one of those bucket list things. My kids were starting to play instruments, and it's always been one of my goals to have a family band. In fact, my wife just picked up the banjo in this pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah.
So have you always been interested in politics?
Yeah, I would say I've been politically aware my entire life. My family are fairly deep in politics. My parents were fairly politically involved. I didn't really get sort of deep into politics really until we moved to Grafton, and I started to realize the value of town meeting and the way that Massachusetts does local government. I had always been more of a, state and national politically aware person. But local politics is amazing. I love the way that we do politics in Grafton. It's such a direct process. And I love that form of government. That the whole town meeting process is just amazing. We all get together as voters, we hash things out. If you feel motivated to speak on something, you get up on the mic and you influence your peers, and then we, each have a vote at town meeting. And I just love the directness and the, engagement of that process. You have such a voice in local government that you really don't at the state and federal level. So it's, my involvement in local government really is over the past few years.
So which of your life experiences is going to help you the most if you were to become a select board member?
I think it's an accumulation of different things. It really is. It feels to me like, when I decided to kind of throw my hat in the ring, it was one of those situations where I just felt a gravity towards running. And in that gravity, there was this accumulation of different skill sets that I have acquired throughout my life that really kind of added up to having a good skill set to be able to be successful in the role. From those early military experiences and learning the value of organizational structure and chain of command and self-discipline and accountability, into my consulting career with being able to communicate well within a business context and also kind of developing relationships. And then all of the relevant experience that I have in Grafton on the various boards and committees. So really is a number of different things that kind of added up to me thinking, well, I think I could do this job really well.
So why specifically select board?
Well, I would like to be in a decision-making position. So I've been in advisory boards with CIPC and Finance Committee, and I've had a lot of valuable experience on those boards. I really would like to be in a decision-making capacity in Grafton. I'd like to be on the executive board. I'd like to be in a position of greater influence in Grafton, to be able to represent the residents well and to be able to really have a more meaningful way to improve life in the town.
So if elected, other than a decision-making role, what other roles do you see in your future?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a lot to the select board, right? So there's that decision-making role, there's managing contracts, there's managing Tim and kind of the day-to-day operations. There's a lot of coordination that needs to happen with other boards and committees. That's certainly something that I'd like to see a little bit more emphasis on, is having better collaboration between the boards and committees. There certainly is an element of community outreach. That's another thing that I'd like to see a little bit more emphasis on. I currently see a lot of, particularly during this pandemic, there's been a lot of kind of one-way communication. There hasn't been a lot of interaction necessarily. So I'd like to see a more back and forth approach and a way for people to feel like they have a voice.
So while you've been under quarantine, have you had any life experiences that you think you might be able to bring with you to select board?
Let's see. That's a good one. I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. I guess maybe the value of pacing things has been something that I've learned a lot. And maybe another thing is patience. So I have found myself being frustrated, I guess, in different situations, having to kind of wait in line, having to wait for things to happen, having to wait for information. The whole budgeting process with Finance Committee has been an exercise in waiting. So I think having patience is something that, that's just baked into government. Government it is a little bit glacial in its nature. And so you have to have a certain amount of persistence and take the long view on things and be patient and look for opportunities. So that's part of it. And then just the pacing of things, I guess, making sure that my wife and I have been taking long walks in the afternoons. And part of that is to really, we've both been incredibly busy, busier in the pandemic than we were before the pandemic by far. We're both dealing with different crisis situations in our professional life, and also trying to manage things at home and in town. So as well as the campaigning. So things have been fairly crazy. And I've definitely learned the value of stepping out of that insane pace, even if it's just for an hour, and to, the value of doing that very systemically and kind of on a schedule to make sure that you're giving yourself that time to be able to regenerate and recharge.
Okay. So how would you tackle the issue of economic development?
Sure. So economic development is a long game. It's something that takes years to really develop. I think it's something that requires a lot of coordination. I view economic development as the primary responsibility of the town administrator, working with the economic development coordinator in Grafton. I think the select board has both a direct and an indirect role in helping to facilitate economic development in Grafton. I'd like to see the select board be in that coordination role where they're giving specific direction and guidance and making sure that all of the different participants are aligned with their priorities in terms of economic development. So we have our town administrator, the economic development coordinator, we have EDC, we have our town planner, our planning board. It takes a village to do economic development successfully, and it's the select board's role to really coordinate those resources. I think there's also a direct role for the select board in networking, for sure, making sure that they're connected up with the local chambers of commerce. I think there's a role for them to have a direct impact on making sure that we have a very robust relationship with the Office of Business Development at the state level. So there's lots of different things that you can do. The select board certainly should prioritize with the town administrator to make sure that all of our department heads are prioritizing grant writing and looking for grant opportunities as well. So it really is kind of a mishmash of different things that we need to do, but it's the select board's role to really set the agenda and make sure that everybody's operating off of the same playbook.
Is it important for select board members to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of economic development, or is it best to leave it to the coordinator?
Sure, I think it's a mix. I think with everything, the select board has such a wide variety of things that they oversee and policies that they look after and departments that they interact with. They have to be able to simultaneously understand the nuts and bolts of it, but they can't be in the weeds. Primarily, the select board needs to have that long vision. They have to have that sort of strategic view. The select board is in that role where, really unique role in Grafton, where they're the only ones that really are in a position to have that strategic long view, because everybody else is just reacting to the day-to-day and year-to-year events that are happening in town. So I think you have to understand the nuts and bolts, but you also have to trust that that day-to-day is going on, and your focus needs to be making sure that those day-to-day decisions and the year-to-year decisions are aligned with that more strategic view. I think there definitely is some work to do in terms of economic development as well. With supporting new and existing businesses, I'd like to see a more customer service approach to the way that we do economic development and support businesses. I'd like to make sure that everybody who interacts with any of the stakeholders, whether they be the inspector or the ZBA or the planning board or our town planner, the TA, everybody, that any business owner that's interacting in Grafton, I want to make sure that whoever they're interacting with, that person has their customer service hat on, and that Grafton is seen as a good, strong, consistent partner that's going to be supporting in a really open and friendly way for our businesses.
Okay. So you're ready to tackle some of the major discussion topics in town?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Okay. Where would you like to start? Let's start medical marijuana. What's your stance on that?
Yeah, cannabis. So that's an interesting one. It's definitely a hot button topic for some. It's not really a hot button topic for me necessarily. My perspective on recreational marijuana and cannabis in general is Grafton was in very strong support when it was put on the ballot at a state level. I think 80–90% of Grafton voted in favor of legalizing marijuana. So we have very strong advocacy and support among the voting populations in Grafton. We have had a great process, one of the best democratic processes that I've seen at town meeting with our planning board, going before the town, bringing lots of options in terms of updating our use tables. I loved that town meeting. So they gave us a whole bunch of options as far as what kind of cannabis operations do we want in Grafton. So we decided what we wanted, and then they brought all of these other options. It was really a menu of options in terms of, okay, we've decided what type of cannabis operations we want, and then we decided as a town where we wanted those. So that was a great process. Very open, very engaging. Any major decisions that we make as a town, voters should have that type of information and that type of engagement to be able to make these important decisions. So that was a great process. You fast forward, we've signed a bunch of community host agreements. We have business owners that are interested in coming into town and opening up our operations. I think we should be supporting those business owners to make sure that they're successful in Grafton. There's been some discussion about whether Grafton can support 1, 2, 3 different retail operations in town. I'm not as bothered as other people are about that. I think these business owners are coming to Grafton with business plans. They have investors. They're looking to invest millions of dollars to rehab facilities. They wouldn't be doing that if they didn't think they could make money off of these operations. So I would let them open up their shops. I would support them. And worst case scenario, if you actually can't support 3 businesses in Grafton, you've done some significant rehab of those locations where they open their shops up. And now you have a sort of ready to go business location where we can bring another type of business into Grafton. This is an opportunity that's really a once in a generation opportunity for bringing in additional revenue, and Grafton should be grabbing the bull by the horns and really taking advantage of the opportunity. I guess the last thing that I'll say on that is around the revenue. When you think about long-term planning and fiscal management, there are very, very few opportunities like this that come along where you have a new source of revenue. Grafton should, in my opinion, shouldn't just take this money and put it right into funding operations. There are significant operational needs, but this is something that's new. It's money that we haven't been depending on all along. So we have an opportunity to do something with this revenue that we haven't been able to do before. So there's just a couple of things that I would suggest that Grafton think about. One is to help to stop the bleeding with our capital backlog that's been growing year after year. And the other is to help put a down payment on our OPEB liability. It's a super wonky thing that we're required by law to have a trust account, which helps as a backstop for our employment benefits and retirement. It's something that every single town in Massachusetts is struggling with, and it's something that Grafton doesn't have a very good plan for right now. So since we have this new revenue coming in, I would look to investigate whether we could put some of that towards our OPEB trust fund to just, again, it's not going to solve the problem, but it's going to start us on a path where we can start addressing that need, which grows year after year after year.
Okay. Are you in favor of the super park or not?
I would say, as it's currently proposed, I'm not in favor of the super park. It's well, a couple of reasons. I don't think it's the right priority right now. I don't love the funding sources for it. I don't like the way that voters were approached, particularly in the 2015 town meeting, to transfer money out of overlay funds and into a super park fund. It's funny, in that town meeting, I actually had one of those light bulb moments. I was considering whether I wanted to support the super park or not. And the commentary was that this wasn't going to increase your taxes. It's not going to cost any additional money. And there was this thing that went off in my head, and I started to think, but because I started at that point, I was plugged into Grafton finances, and I started to think to myself, well, we have a kind of a fixed amount of free cash that's available to fund capital projects. And nobody's telling me, if I'm voting for the super park, what am I voting to not fund? What's next on the list? What's the thing that gets pushed off of the capital plan if we fund the super park? I just didn't like that discussion. And that was actually the kind of light bulb moment for me that got me really passionate about capital planning, which is an incredibly wonky and kind of boring thing. But I didn't like that. I didn't really like the visioning sessions that we did because people were asked to provide input on things that they wanted in this park, but they weren't given any kind of indicative pricing. So when you're asking people, hey, do you want a gym? Do you want performance athletic fields? Do you want a gazebo? Do you want a splash pad? And you're not giving them any pricing. You're not giving them any way to assess how much it's actually going to cost them. They're just going to kind of sign up for everything. And so I just didn't really like that, the quality of that process. So I just don't think it's the right thing right now. The one thing that I do like about the Super Park that really resonated with me quite deeply was the accessibility portion of it. I would love to see some investment in our existing playgrounds in Grafton, which we've got quite a few of them, to provide that additional accessibility for kids with disabilities. So that's something that I'm very strongly in support of. I would take that investment and I would put it into the existing facilities that we have.
Okay. And as you used the phrase the long view a little while ago, and in relation to the budget, how far out can you discuss the budget and actually have it be realistic?
Yeah, that's a great question. In my experience in both the kind of the Grafton municipal finance environment, but also at work, you're looking at 3 to 4, maybe 5 years on the outside in terms of that long view, where you can have reasonable assumptions that you're confident aren't going to change over that time frame, where you can predict the external impacts that might impact things in a significant enough way, where you know what your cost drivers are and where you're fairly comfortable that your forecasting is reasonably accurate. Beyond 5 years, I haven't seen any towns be successful at really doing that sort of really long-term forecasting. So it's that 3 to 5 year time frame. You know, when we talk about overrides, it's always that 3 to 5 year time frame that towns think about the length of their override if they're towns that are dealing with systemic structural deficits.
I can assume that you talk to a lot of supporters. How often do you get the opportunity to talk to people that might not be inclined to vote for you? And do they give you a sense of what they really want from somebody that's going to serve on select board?
Sure. I mean, look, Bob, I take all comers. You know, I like all the candidates. I think I would represent everybody in Grafton. I really value diversity, diversity of thought, diversity of perspective. And I really try to have those difficult conversations with voters, no matter who they are, because ultimately I'm representing their wants and their needs. And their wishes. And I think that's an important thing to do. I certainly don't shy away from anybody in person or online. We all have to be interacting within our community with everybody. So it's, I purposely seek out conversations with people that challenge my thinking and the way that my orientation is to kind of the select board role. So I've enjoyed those conversations. Not everybody's always going to agree with everything that you have to put out there, but it's important to talk to everybody. So I'm completely an open book that way. There's no hidden agenda. It's just I'm out there.
Okay. What, in your opinion, what sets you apart from other candidates?
Well, I think I bring a significant amount of leadership experience to the role. So I've been in leadership roles in my entire adult life. I am currently the chair of the finance committee. For over 10 years, I've been in senior leadership roles in my company. I've managed multi-million-dollar budgets. I still do, with underpinning contracts that again are multi-million-dollar contracts with all sorts of different business relationships, from managed service to cloud services to contractor relationships and all sorts of different types and sizes of contracts. So I bring significant, I'm just comfortable in that executive leadership role. So that's something that I really would bring to the select board that I think differentiates me in a significant way. I feel very comfortable in that executive management position. I also bring, I think, the strongest kind of fiscal and financial mind to the board of anybody that's running in this election. I have both municipal experience with my experience on finance committee. I also do have significant formal education. I have a master's, bachelor in business science. I did a lot of accounting courses. I manage a very large budget for work. So I bring a lot of kind of fiscal knowledge to the board. I also bring a lot of kind of committee board and experience from all of my volunteering in town. And I think one of the things that differentiates me is just my attitude towards the work. I have a real passion for local government. I have a real passion for doing the work. I have a very hard work ethic. So I think, getting in, rolling your sleeves up, getting your hands dirty and doing the work, I have a real passion for it. It's something that I'm really excited for. I think there's a potential to actually have some fun doing this work. We don't have to always have these really boring, long, dreadful meetings. There's a fun element to the work as well. So I bring that positive attitude. I really do look, to get to develop that sense of trust and those deep relationships within the kind of the team context that you need to be successful on the select board.
Okay. So do your kids have any strong opinions about your political aspirations?
Yeah, they think my wife and I are both a little crazy. We spend a lot of time on Zoom these days. Ever since they were born, we spent a lot of times in committee meetings and, having discussions on the phone with various constituents and other people in town. So they're kind of used to it. They think we're a little crazy, but they put up with it.
Okay. At this point, I would be happy to turn the microphone over to you, so to speak, and let you do a closing statement or an appeal for votes. And we're that close to the end of the program. So
that sounds good.
Be my guest.
Well, again, Bob, thanks so much for hosting. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the work that GCTV does in town. It's really important work. I feel like you guys are kind of our partners in crime during our meetings and whatnot. And I love the, just the value of having, democracy in action easily available to the public. So I really appreciate the work that you guys do. To the Grafton voters, I'll just say this. I've already kind of talked about who I am and what I bring to the table. Grafton is going to be facing some significant issues over the coming years. We're going to be facing some difficult decisions. You're going to need a leader that is communicating and engaging with the public in a very meaningful way. You're going to need leadership that are decisive, that are able to make quick decisions and not put off the difficult discussions, not put off the difficult decisions. You're going to need somebody who's a steady hand at the wheel. Character is revealed in circumstances when you have a crisis situation. And I think you're seeing that play out in real time with what's happening in town over the past few months. So Grafton is going to need that steady hand. I'll be that steady hand for you. I'll be your voice for change. I ask for your vote on June 23rd. Thank you.
Okay. So my guest for this session has been Matt Often, who's running for a seat on the select board. And on behalf of everyone here at Grafton Community Television, thank you for watching. I'm Bob DeToma.